Hello, my name is Ben Joyner, and in this video we will defend a law from the Old Testament. This ancient Hebrew code of life is often criticized for being immoral, unethical, and downright evil. Please understand that the Old Testament laws do not apply to Gentile Christians. Nonetheless, if these laws are really given by the true God, then they would never be evil. You can find more videos like this one on my channel, Apologetics Ben Joyner, under the playlist Defending the Bible. Provide the context in which it is morally correct to sanction the purchase and sale of human beings as property, in a lifelong involuntary servitude to be passed on to one's children as a permanent inheritance. Leviticus 25:44-46. This is a falsely based question. Involuntary servitude, what we think of as slavery, is expressly forbidden in the Old Testament law. Exodus 21:16. Whoever steals a man and sells him, and anyone found in possession of him, shall be put to death. This command makes no distinction between an Israelite slave or a Gentile slave. To force someone into slavery or to own such a person is punished by death. These commands are unclear to us because we are too conditioned by slavery in the American South. But if we read the Old Testament, we learn of something called the slave price. Why would the slave be paid this upfront fee for his or her slavery if it is involuntary servitude? It wasn't involuntary at all. In ancient times, a person did not simply need money as today. Today you can work for money and go and buy the things you need. In those days, money only had certain uses. Everything else was typically made where you lived. So it made sense to form contracts or bonds to work on large farms that had all the necessary facilities. In fact, bondsman is an old word connected to slavery. Now, people were forced into slavery in the ancient world. This typically led to a fear in the nation of a large slave population and revolts in many cases. But in the Old Testament law, this is expressly forbidden. Now to the passage at hand, Leviticus 25:44. As for your male and female slaves whom you have, you may buy male and female slaves from among the nations that are around you. You may also buy from among strangers who sojourn with you and their clans that are with you, who have been born in your land, and they may be your property. You may bequeath them to your sons after you to inherit as a possession forever. You may make slaves of them, but over your brothers, the people of Israel, you shall not rule one over another ruthlessly. In ancient times, the children of slaves were not slaves. In ancient times, the children were considered property of the parents. In fact, it was common for parents to kill children in the Bronze Age simply for displeasing them, or more specifically for displeasing the father. This was even true for the children of slaves. They were not the property of the slave owner, but rather the property of the slave, given that the slave was their father. Such practices led to the Hebrew laws against killing children and the dramatic story in Genesis where Abraham is commanded by God to not kill Isaac, but it's drawn out in this dramatic way because in that day and time it was common to kill children for any reason that they displeased you. The idea that a slave would only give birth to a slave is an American invention called chattel slavery. So when Leviticus 25 says, your sons may inherit as a possession forever, it just means that the son inherits the slave, not the child of the slave. In the ancient world, becoming a slave often meant your children could benefit from food and education, etc., of your owner. And you now had a large sum of money from the slave price to buy land and animals of your own that your children would inherit. But what if you tried to make bonds with an elderly slave owner? Perhaps he had a huge operation with hundreds of people dependent on the operation itself to continue existing and being productive. He would need to keep his staff of slaves full, and he would need his son to carry on the business after his death. But the Hebrews were allotted land by the Old Testament law, so safeguards were put in place to keep these original lands in the hands of the families they were given to. This wasn't true for foreigners. But in the Old Testament law, Hebrews could become slaves, but for a short period of time. If I remember correctly, it's only for 6 years maximum. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Comment and tell me what you think. Share with anyone you want. Subscribe to my channel for more. You can find out more videos defending the Old Testament law on my playlist, Defending the Bible. Also, check out other playlists such as Genesis versus Evolution, Proof God Exists, Calvinism and Predestination, and Social Commentary. Jesus loves you and makes sense too.